So we'll be discussing legislation and ethical issues, and of course, cybercrime and fraud that seeks to battle out or to be battled out by this legislation and ethical issues. So our learning objectives for today, number one, is to discuss IT crimes and explain the three main categories of crimes involving computers. Define cyber attack and illustrate recent major cyber attacks conducted in the US and the Philippines. So summarize SOX Act of 2002, financial integrity legislation. Describe and discuss financial security legislation relevant to IT auditors. Describe and discuss privacy-related legislation relevant to IT auditors. Discuss Philippine laws relevant to IT auditors. And discuss international privacy laws relevant to IT auditors. And lastly, describe and discuss ethical issues and code of ethics relevant to IT auditors. So in the US alone, IT crimes and cyber attacks have been steadily increasing. So imagine just from 2015, from 288,000 complaints, just taking in those who complained, from 288,000 to almost doubled in just a span of, this is 2019, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in just a span of 5 years, it almost doubled. And the losses has more than doubled, now at $3.5 billion lost to IT crimes and cyber attacks in US alone. So there are certain types or several types of IT crime and cyber attacks. First one, we have business email compromise. This is a sophisticated scam targeting business working with fraud suppliers and or business who regularly perform wire transfer payments. We also have ransomware. It's a form of malware targeting both humans and technical weaknesses in an effort to deny the availability of critical data and or systems. We have tech support fraud and auto fraud. Basically, this is the same, only just the subject being different. So very popular to sa US. You can even see YouTube channels who are dedicated to uncovering the fraudsters who do this tech support fraud. Now, auto fraud, this one, an automobile or a car would be offered at a significantly low price, and then the seller will need to rush the sale. So parang in order for you to avail of the ridiculously low price, the perpetrator would ask you to deposit an advance. So parang let's say the car is now just 100,000, and then you are offered kunin mo na sa'yo na to. Let's the value is around, let's say, 2 million for a car or 1.8 million. Tapos offer nila sa'yo ng 100,000 bago pa, let's say 2 years pa lang nagamit or 1 year pa lang nagamit. And then they will ask you to wire transfer or fund transfer an amount to reserve. So parang ikaw pa ngayon yung subject of a verification by the fraudster or the perpetrator. So sabi niya sa'yo, deposit ka ng 20,000, 35,000, and this would be yours. And then you can check it and then take it home from this. And then pag transfer mo na yung pera or transfer mo na yung initial payment, wala na siya. Next, we have government impersonation email scam. So this type of internet crime involves posing as government, law enforcement official, or simply someone pretending to have certain level of authority in order to persuade unaware victims to provide their personal information. Intimidation or or extortion scam. So these two are similar, pretending to be somebody. Okay, so sometimes this could be your say yung BIR, your banks, your credit card, email sa sa'yo, hey, your mail has been deactivated, etc. You haven't paid your taxes, this blah blah blah. And then real estate fraud, similar to auto fraud, just that this time instead of a car, what would be offered is the property. Okay, and confidence fraud or romance scam. So this type of crime refers to schemes designed to look for companionship, friendship, or romance via online resources. So just recent yesterday, I have read someone uh, in Twitter who has been victimized. So nagpanggap na parang somebody who is looking for companionship. Kunyari, uh, tinuruan siya mag-trade ng foreign currency. So, nung una, tinuruan siya, let's say, wait, lagay ka ng 100 US dollars into the platform or the foreign exchange. So, nagbigay siya ng $100. After a while, after a few days, naging $1,000. Na-withdraw naman niya. Tapos, lagay ulit siya. Yung 1,000 niya, naging 4,000 after a while. So, now, yung fraudster, nagpapanggap na friend niya o kaibigan niya or pretending to be someone who is interested with him or with her, convince him to put more. So up to, let's say, 10,000 US dollars para he could gain a lot more profit. So imagine parang nung una 100 lang, naging 2,000 USD. So pagkalagay niya ng $100 or 100,000, ilan ba? 1,000 USD, 10,000 USD. ah hindi na niya makontak yung fraudster. Hindi na rin niya ma-withdraw from the platform yung pera kasi turns out that the platform is being operated by the same fraudster. So yun. So let's be careful with people, especially those who we meet online or offline. So in the Philippines, there are several cyber crimes or cyber attacks that has been identified by the PNP Cybercrime Division. So the following we have online libel, scam, photo and video voyeurism, computer-related identity theft, threats, system interference or hacking, unjust taxation, illegal access, robbery with intimidation, and ATM or credit card fraud. So those are an examples of cybercrimes that happened. So we can categorize these crimes involving computer into several categories or main categories. Number one, the computer is the target of the crime. For example, theft of the info stored or unauthorized access of or modification of information. So, dyan pumapasok hacking, uh, viruses, malware, etc. So, computer is used as an instrument of the crime. Number two, so ginamit lang yung computer. So, parang ATM fraud, credit card fraud, financial fraud, it can also happen without the computer. So, in these cases, the computer is just used as a method or an instrument to commit the crime. So, ATM or credit card fraud might happen via what we call phishing. You'll receive an email that your bank account has been deactivated, etc., etc., and then you will be asked to log on to a website that really looks like your bank account. Pero that is actually a credentials collection site created by the perpetrator. Okay. And lastly, number three, computer is not necessary to commit the crime. So computer is incidental and used only to commit the crime faster. So this is similar to number two. Okay, but for example, computer is not necessary to commit the crime. Let's say yung mga blackmails or yung mga confidence fraud, yung mga auto fraud. So the computer is not really necessary to commit the crime, but is conducted or used through the computer. Question so far? So now we take a look at different cyber attacks that happened around the globe in the past few years or in the recent years. So cyber attacks are an attempt by hackers to damage or destroy a computer network or system. This is deliberate and malicious exploitation of computer networks, systems, and computer-generated data by individuals or organizations to obtain valuable information from the users through fraudulent means. This can be labeled as either cyber campaigns, cyber warfare, or cyber terrorism depending on the context. So one of the most popular cyber attack and probably identified as one of the first and one of the largest. So yung Y2K na bug. So yan, this was created by a Filipino student, no? Sa Pinoy Pride, year 2000. It's one of the largest attack or one of the largest virus that was deployed in the World Wide Web. So what happens is the virus uh, contains a script called I love you .vbs. So pag kinlik mo siya, what it will do is copy your internet credentials, the ID and the username, the password that you use to connect to the internet and send it back to the perpetrator. And then it also copies in your address book, access your address book, and will send everyone in your phone book or your address book an email saying, it's I love you, blah, 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 blah. So, dun siya kumalat. Once you click it, kumalat siya ng kumalat kasi it exponentially exploded. So, yeah. So, it was actually created by a Filipino student na parang, I think sabi niya, it was never intended to come out. Although, at one point, parang that's one of, parang sinadya rin. Actually, it was made to be a part of his thesis. Parang his thesis was to create something that will enable him to get uh, the access niya so that he could use it for his own internet. Kasi before, around year 2000, maybe you are not aware, uso pa yung dial-up internet. So before you can connect to the internet, you need a prepaid load card. Tapos nandun yung username and password. You have to log in or dial in before you connect to the internet. So that's a necessity. So hindi katulad ngayon naka-postpaid na yung internet through the Globe or PLDT Smart. So yun yung uso. And then that's what you need to access the internet. Yun. Okay. Dahil sinabi. And actually, he was never jailed. Parang recently lang natukoy kung nasan yung location niya, etc., etc. But he was never charged because Uh, the internet was relatively new during 2000s, just 20 years ago. So it was new, and therefore there was no law to charge him with. So hindi siya na-punish for the damage that it has affected the whole world with. So one of the examples of cyber attacks is in 2016. The internet giant Yahoo announced it had been a victim of the biggest data breach in history. So the company said the attack compromised their real names, email addresses, dates of birth, and telephone numbers of 500 million users. So, and then additionally, couple months later, they say that another group of hackers compromised more than 1 billion accounts. So Yahoo.com, who introduced Yahoo Mail, this is prior to Google Mail. So if you are still using Yahoo Mail, although it has already improved its security, etc., I suggest you already move to a better email provider so you can be provided with better security. So, in Marriott Starwood Hotels on November 30, 2018, the hotel empire revealed a security breach with its Starwood Hotels that may have compromised the data of 500 million guests. So, Adult Friend Finder in October 2016, the website said hackers were able to gain more than access to more than 20 years of data on its 6 databases that included names, email address, and passwords. So Under Armour MyFitnessPal, it's an application where you can record your calorie intake plus your exercises routines. So in February 2018, the sports apparel brand Under Armour disclosed that a hacker gained access of email addresses and login information to 150 million users of its food and nutrition website, MyFitnessPal. eBay. In May 2014, eBay announced that hackers got into company network. So in May 2014, eBay announced that hackers got into the company network using the credentials of 3 corporate employees and had complete inside access for 229 days, during which time they were able to collect personal information of all its 145 million users. So Equifax in September 2017, one of the largest credit bureaus in the US, revealed personal information, including social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and in some cases driver license numbers were compromised. In 2020, so 4 Chinese military hackers have been charged with breaking into computer networks of the credit reporting agency and stealing personal information of tens of millions of Americans, the Justice Department announced. So, very recently, we'll see cyber attacks, which are what we call state sponsored. So, some country or some government or some country is backing up the hack. So, Heartland Payment Systems in January 2009, Heartland Payment Systems, the sixth largest payments processor in the US, announced that its processing system were breached in 2008, exposing more than 134 of customers' credit card numbers and more than 650 financial services companies. And in 2013, the retail giant was attacked days before Thanksgiving when hackers gained access to a third-party HVAC vendor to its point of sales. HVAC is yung ventilation system, which also includes their air conditioning system. So to its point of sales payment card readers, which in return collected data of up to 110 million customers. Philippine Commission on Elections in April 2016, a message was posted on the Comelec website by hackers from Anonymous, warning the government not to mess with the elections, and the entire database was stolen and posted online. So a total of 55 million records were stolen. So we also have the Bangladesh Central Bank robbery, also known colloquially as the Bangladesh Bank cyber heist, which took place on February 2016 when 35 fraudulent instructions were issued by security hackers via SWIFT network to illegally transfer close to $1 billion from the Federal Reserve of New York Bank belonging to the Bangladesh Bank, the Central Bank of Bangladesh. So 35 fraudulent instructions were successful in transferring $101 million with $20 million traced to Sri Lanka and $81 million to the Philippines. And also recently in September 2020, UCPB, Nigerian hackers were able to steal 167 million pesos from this bank. So hackers were able to steal through malware, which gave them remote access functions and allowed them to send and receive cash online. So this malware was, or this malware made it to the company systems because of unupdated or unpatched Windows software. Okay, question so far. Okay, so due to the proliferation of these cyber attacks, hacking incidents, and others which have led to the loss of money, resources for some, and damages, there has been legislation made related to the information technology. One of which is Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. So this law from the US was passed on July 30 of the year to help protect investors from fraudulent financial reporting by corporations. Also known as SOX Act of 2002 or the Corporate Responsibility Act of 2002, it mandated strict reforms to existing securities regulations and imposed tough new penalties on lawbreakers. The Act created new rules for accountants, auditors, and corporate officers for more stringent record-keeping requirements. So the SOX included items like corporate responsibility, increased criminal punishment, accounting regulation, and new protection. So you must understand that SOX was not created directly to respond to IT threats. However, due to SOX impacted what we call internal control systems. And as we have discussed earlier on the previous chapter, IT is inherent or what's the term? Ingrained with the internal control system. That's why it's heavily affecting our IT systems. So the major provisions, Section 302, Section 404, and Section 802. So next we have this legislation which has been created specifically to respond to computer fraud and abuse and other cyber attacks. So why are we discussing US legislation? So because it's highly relevant and most of the laws created in the Philippines have been based on this US laws. And further, because internet really has no real jurisdiction, and sometimes if you are a US company or your data is processed in the US, you will be subject to US security legislation. So first we have Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1984. So this was the government's first response to a network security and network related crime and to cover crimes such as trespassing, unauthorized entry into an online system, exceeding authorized access, and exchanging information on how to gain unauthorized access. So this is one of the earliest computer law. Imagine that's 1984. Next, we have Homeland Security Act of 2002. This is after the September 11 or 9/11 attacks, terrorist attacks. So, prevent terrorist attacks within the US and to reduce vulnerability of the US to terrorism. So, it plays a major role in the security of cyberspace and it enforces many limitations and restrictions to the users of the internet. So the impact of this act contributes to the security of cyberspace because its primary function is to protect the people of the US from any form of attack, including internet acts. Next, PCI DSS of 2004. So refers to the technical operational requirements applicable to entities that store, process, transmit card holder data. So the PCI DSS Council or the PCI DSS law or standard refers to what we call debit cards and credit cards. So that's backed up, or the council was founded by major credit card companies American Express, Discover, Japan Credit Bureau, Japan Credit Bureau International, MasterCard, and Visa. This is continually updated, parang PCI DSS 4.0 na yata. Federal Information Security Management Act of 2002. So the e-Government Act to provide a comprehensive framework for ensuring the effectiveness of information security controls over information resources that support federal operations and assets to provide for development and maintenance of operations and assets to provide for the development and maintenance of minimum controls required to protect federal information and information systems. So FISMA requires federal agencies to develop, document, and put in place information security programs with the purpose of protecting both the information and the systems implemented to support the operations and assets of the agencies, including those provided, managed by another agency, contractor, or other sources. The signature laws just state that signatures made on electronic medium is acceptable and legally enforceable. So we also have privacy legislation. So this just discusses, this is one of the first piece of regulation regarding privacy. So this act places certain requirements on federal agencies, such as permitting individuals to determine what personal records are collected and maintained by federal agencies, prevent personal records that were obtained for a particular purpose from being used or made available for another purpose without consent, and third, gain access to the personal information in federal agency records and to correct or amend them. So have Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986. So this is the first revision of the Privacy Act. Communications Decency Act of the 1996. So this is the third privacy regulation. So bans the making of indecent or patently offensive material available to minors through computer networks. So the act imposes 250,000 USD and imprisonment of up to 2 years. So the CDA does not specifically exempt from liability any person who provides access or connection to or from a facility, system, or network that is not under the control of the person violating the act. This also states that an employer shall not be held liable for the actions of an employee unless the employee's conduct is within the scope of his or her employment. More recent application of this law has been used to protect minors' use of social networks and falling prey to predators and stalkers. The HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. This states that health information and health records are confidential, and it's very confidential. There are penalties and prohibitions regarding these items. So this is one of the first pieces of modern privacy regulation, and it's a building block for the different other privacy regulations because of the stringent qualities included in the law. The high-tech is just an addition to the HIPAA Act, promotes the adoption and meaningful use of health IT in the US. Graham-Leach-Bliley (GLB) Act of 1999 requires financial institutions to protect consumer financial privacy. So previously we were talking about healthcare. This time we are looking at financial institutions. Financial institutions are companies that offer consumers financial products or services like loans, financial or investment advice, or insurance. So financial institutions are now required to explain their information sharing practices to their customers and protect their sensitive data. So for example, if you are a customer of BDO Savings Bank, BDO Lending. So this means that if you are a customer of BDO Savings Bank and you have an account with them, dapat you will never be, unless you agree to it, you will never be contacted by BDO Lending to offer their services just because they saw or they have information, they have your address, they have your contact number from your savings account. So the data you provided for the savings account is only to manage your savings account. Nothing more, nothing less. So dapat yung BDO, tatawagan ka lang niya regarding your savings account. So if they call and they are from a subsidiary or another sister company offering something else, that is a violation of your data privacy. So we also have the USA Patriot Act. I'm not gonna read anymore, but you can read from the slides. This is more of just an expansion and making the what you call the other act, the Homeland Security Act, improving it. Next, we also have some international privacy laws. So we have the PIPEDA from Canada, the Law on Protection of Personal Data held by Private Parties of 2010 in Mexico, the GDPR by the European Union, the Safe Harbor Act of 1998 in the EU. Okay, so we also have Philippine laws related to cyber and information security. So we have the National Cybersecurity Plan of 2002. It's a new paradigm with a comprehensive national cybersecurity strategy framework. Oh, plan tayo in fairness. So it is institutionalized the adoption and implementation of information security governance and risk management. So the primary goals of this plan are as follows: assuring the continuous operations of our national critical infrastructures, public and military networks, implementing cyber resiliency measures to enhance our ability to respond to threats before, during, and after attacks, and effective coordination with law enforcement agencies, and a cybersecurity educated society. We also have Electronic Commerce Act of year 2000, that's RA 8792, signed into law on June 2000. So e-commerce in general, including legal recognition of electronic writing or document and data messages and communication of electronic data message or electronic documents. Electronic commerce in specific areas, including carriage of goods, and electronic transactions in the government. We also have Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009. So they should guarantee the fundamental rights of every child from all forms of neglect, cruelty, and other conditions prejudicial to his or her development, and protect every child from all forms of exploitation and abuse. That's why some of the sites are blocked at the ISP level. You will not be able to access these sites because of this. I will not say it. We will be blocked. Char. We also have Anti-Photo and Video Terrorism Act of 2009 in response to a scandal. So Congress passed RA 9995 to prevent publication and distribution of similar material in the future. So the law prohibits recording of videos and taking photos of the following. And the law ultimately seeks to prevent the reproduction, distribution, and publication of the said material, regardless of whether the persons featured consented to the recording. So even though you are not the first person to share, shinare it mo, sinend mo sa messenger, sinend mo sa GC nyo, sinend mo sa Telegram nyo, no? As long as you have the possession, you also aided in the distribution, you could be pursued according to this act. And I think this is the last one. This is Data Privacy Act of 2012, fairly recent. RA 10173 protects individuals from unauthorized processing of personal information that is private, not publicly available, and identifiable, or the identity of the individual is apparent either through direct attribution or when put together with other available information. This law entails first, all PI must be collected for reasons that are specified, legitimate, and reasonable. In other words, customer must opt in for their data to be used for specific reasons that are transparent and legal. Hindi pwede ang, what's the term? Implicit acceptance. So dapat you should have said yes. May chinek kang box, may minark kang button na you agree. Hindi yung pwedeng by clicking this you agree. No, that is an implicit acceptance. There should be an explicit wording or acceptance in the privacy statement. Second, PI must be handled properly. Information must be kept accurate and relevant, used only for the stated purposes, and retained only for as long as reasonably needed. Customers must be active in ensuring that other unauthorized parties do not have access to their customers' information. Third, the personal information must be discarded in a way that does not make it visible and accessible to unauthorized third parties. And Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. So RA 10175, its goal was to penalize acts like cybersex, child pornography, identity theft, and unsolicited electronic communication in the country. So unsolicited electronic communication, spam. So RA 10175 punishes content-related offenses, such as the following. The law also penalizes offenses against the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of computer data and systems, such as illegal acts, interference, data interference, system interference, misuse of devices, and cyber squatting. And last na ba to? We have the ICT, or Department of Information and Communications Technology Act of 2015. So previously we have the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC, alone working on our cyberspace. Now we have established a different or an additional department for information and communications technology. So the ICT, so policy planning, improve public access, resource sharing and capacity building, and consumer protection and industry development. Okay, any questions so far? So maraming laws and legislation. That is why we have to be aware of our compliance. The last part would be the code of ethics. So the code of ethics is not really a requirement, but for professionals such as IT auditors, the code of ethics help them give the best service that they can. So this defines acceptable behaviors for relevant parties. This promotes high standards of practice throughout the organization. This will provide a benchmark for organizational members to use for self-evaluation. Establish a framework for professional behavior, obligations, and responsibilities. Offer a vehicle for occupational identity and reflect the mark of occupational maturity. So one of the most famous organizations for IT auditors is the ISACA. So we follow their code of ethics. So their code of ethics contains the following: to support the implementation of and encourage compliance with appropriate standards and procedures for the effective governance and management of enterprise information systems technology, including audit, control, security, and risk management. Perform their duties with objectivity, due diligence, and professional care in accordance with professional standards. Serve the interests of stakeholders in a lawful manner while maintaining high standards of conduct and character and not discrediting their profession or the association. Maintain the privacy and confidentiality of information obtained in the course of their activities unless disclosure is required by legal authority. Such information shall not be used for personal benefit or released to inappropriate parties. Maintain competency in their respective fields and agree to undertake only those activities they can reasonably expect to complete with the necessary skills, knowledge, and competence. Inform appropriate parties of the results of work performed, including disclosure of all significant facts known to them that, if not disclosed, may distort the reporting of the results. Lastly, support the professional education, so CPE units, in enhancing their understanding of the governance and management of the enterprise information systems and technology, including audit, control, security, and risk management. So what about irregular and illegal acts? So an irregular act reflects either to an intentional violation of corporate policies or regulatory requirements or an unintentional breach of law, while an illegal act represents a willful violation of the law. So the best way to begin investigating many issues surrounding irregular and illegal acts is to summarize the ISACA auditing guideline dealing with irregularities and illegal acts. That's section 2207. So as IT auditors, remember that it's not our duty or it's not our responsibility to look for or directly look for. We don't directly look for irregular or illegal acts. So this is something that we just keep an eye out for. So, management, so nakalagay naman sa baba, it's important to point out that the management is just responsible for the prevention and detection of irregular and illegal acts, not the IT auditor. So there should be appropriate policies, internal controls, etc. in order to prevent irregular and illegal acts. Tayo as an auditor, we spot things that are irregular, we tell them or we report on this. Parang we found that this is irregular, so provide evidence that this is not just this is not an illegal act. This is not intentional. This is just some irregularity. This is just a one-time thing, etc. So yan, professionals are not responsible for prevention and detection of irregularities or illegal acts. So we might be finished with with our IT auditor. We may say that our opinion is unqualified, but 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 there is still a possibility that fraud has occurred or illegal acts has been conducted within the company. It's just that we didn't see it or we were not able uh, to see it through our uh, process, our procedures. So ganun siya. Kasi no, we must always remember that, especially for the illegal acts, people would hide the evidences as much as possible. So that would be really hard to look for. There would be some that would point to that evidence. That's the only time you'd be able to see it. But if the evidence is properly covered of this illegal act, you won't be able to see it, no matter how hard you look. And then, when professionals have specific information about the existence of an irregularity or illegal act, that is your obligation to report. Pag nakita mo na, dapat i-report mo. That's the only time you have a responsibility. But if nakita mo, hindi mo lang pinansin, parang ayoko hassle, mag-report. So that is your already an obligation. You have already a responsibility. You might be liable under the law. And in the end, pag nagkademandahan, you might be charged as abetting the crime. So professionals should inform management and those charged with the governance when they have identified situations where a higher level of risk exists for potential irregularity or illegal act, even if none is detected. Professionals should be reasonably familiar with the area under review to identify risk factors that may contribute to occurrence of irregular or illegal acts. We must have always professional skepticism. And that ends legislation and ethical issues surrounding the IT auditor. You have any other questions? Hmm? Wala na. If you don't have any other question, you can use the rest of the time to go through some of the activities that I have uploaded in Canvas and answer them. Okay.
Sir, ilan po yung passing sa quiz?
Ilan yung passing sa quiz? Di ba 50%?
50% po. Okay po, thank you po.
Di ba 50% naman? Zero base tayo. So, 50%, you're good.